And the man said, "Can you hear me now?" Aloha, everyone. Welcome to the Kihei Community Association General Membership meeting on May 18th, 2021. My name is Mike Moran. I am the president of the KCA, and we welcome our members as well as our community guests. Our meetings are always open to the entire community. We like to start with a mahalo. Mahalo to our members, to our volunteers, our committee chairs, and our directors. KCA, for those who don't know, KCA is an all-volunteer, nonprofit community association membership organization. So we've been around for 61 years, which is longer than some of our guests have been on this planet. So we welcome everyone tonight, and we remind anybody that's listening to please support our Maui Food Bank. When we had in-person meetings for the last decade or so, we always had an ongoing food drive. And of course, we can't do it now, so you can't come by the door and drop off your donations, but please don't stop donating. The food bank is in greater need than ever now, and even in better times, it was estimated that more than 10% of our keiki and our kupuna often went to bed hungry on this island, as incredible as that seems. So please remember the Maui Food Bank. Tonight, we're going to address an issue that we haven't in quite some time, possibly because it hasn't been in the focus for about a decade, and you'll learn why if you don't already know. And that's our Maui County Community Charter. And what brings it into focus right now is once a decade, we have a charter commission. And we are very pleased and fortunate to have the chair of that commission, who, in spite of taking on that big obstacle, has agreed to spend another evening helping out the community by participating in our meeting this afternoon or this evening. You can tell what kind of a day I am having. But when I mentioned it to Lance, my suggestion was what we have found at KCA in the last few months is that so much of the community really has very, very little idea of what the county charter is. Some don't even know that we have a county charter, much less that we're currently with the Charter Commission. So I asked Lance to please explain with as much detail as he can, with apologies to those of you who are already aware of much of it. But I take great pleasure in introducing our wonderful Maui attorney, Lance Collins. Welcome, Lance. Aloha.
Aloha. Thank you very much, Mike. I will, I'm Lance Collins. I'm the chair of the Maui Charter Commission. Although I'm not speaking here tonight on behalf of the commission, I'm speaking on behalf of myself. I am an attorney in private practice. I have written and published on Maui legal history. I was a compiler, editor, and indexer, well, not editor, but compiler and indexer of the 17-volume proceedings of the Maui County Charter Commissions, 1964 to 2012. That's available at a couple of the public libraries, as well as available online. If you ever have trouble sleeping at night, feel free to read the minutes of old Charter Commission meetings, and I'm sure you'll have no problem going to sleep. So in any event, I am speaking tonight in that context as somebody who does research in legal history, that is familiar with the historical trajectories of charter commissions, and also is a practicing attorney that deals in the areas of the powers of the county. So after talking with Mike and getting a better sense of exactly what are sort of the broad issues to consider, I thought the best way to approach it would be to ask two questions at first. And if you have questions, I believe you can put those in and they will get relayed to us. But the two main questions that I would like to ask myself and answer for the KCA meeting tonight is, what is a county and what is a charter? Because I think a lot of, over the years, when I've talked to folks about the charter revisions and those types of things, it seems that there's a lot of misunderstanding about exactly what the county is and exactly what the charter is. And so I thought if I tried to explain to the best of my ability in a systematic way what the county is and what the charter is, that might be more useful for individuals in terms of being able to interact or engage with the Charter Commission, if that's something you're interested in. So let me start with first by, what is a county? So the word county, which I'm not going to get into the history of it, but the word county is used all over the world to describe a relatively local form of county government, or it's a geographical subdivision of basically a larger political unit. So that's, in a very broad sense, what a county is. But then when it comes down to, well, what is a county in Hawaii, it's very different than what people understand a county is anywhere else in the world. So whatever your conceptions are of what you think a county is, put that aside, bracket it out, because I'm going to share with you, I think, but in a general sense, is what a county is in Hawaii. And if any information that you have about what a county is conflicts with what I'm saying, there's a chance that what you think is a county doesn't actually apply in Hawaii, or of course, the other possibility is that I'm wrong. So what is a county? So in Hawaii, a county is a political subdivision of the state of Hawaii. Counties can exist because of the state constitution, and their powers, with the exception of real property tax now, the powers of the county are solely defined by the state legislature. So what that means is that if the state legislature has not given the county the power to do something, the county does not have the power to do it. There are other places in this world called home rule counties, where counties by their own existence have some kind of inherent powers to do certain things. And that's not the case in Hawaii. All powers that the county exercises are derived from state law. And the legislature has pretty broad discretion to reassign powers between the county and the states. There's some limitations on that, such as the state cannot mandate that the county do new services or take new actions and not fund it. That's one exception to that. And then the other exception is that the county, since the 1978 Constitutional Convention, has the sole power over real property tax. And actually, there was a transitional period. So the constitutional amendment was passed in 78, but it took, I think, about 10 or 15 years for that to totally, the state to stop being involved in real property tax. And that issue is still being litigated to this day about what is real property that the counties have exclusive taxing authority over, and what isn't real property. And those things are still litigated. Many Maui cases, actually, but those things are still litigated to today, even though it's basically been over 40 years. So that's what a county is. So a county is a political subdivision that is given powers by the state to take certain actions. So some of the more common things that you may experience interacting with the county, such as the provision of water by the Department of Water Supply, that occurs because there is a state law that grants that power to the county to basically engage in municipal water service. So that's one example. Another example is development within the special management area of the coastal zone. The Maui Planning Commission issues permits to allow individuals to develop within the special management area, which is basically lands near the shoreline. And the Maui Planning Commission does that, and the county has the power to do that because state law has delegated those responsibilities, which ultimately are federal responsibilities. The state delegates those to the counties. So if the state wanted to, the state could take that away and they could do it themselves. And in fact, they have done that in Kaka'ako on Oahu. They have removed that area from the city and county of Honolulu's prerogative. Another area that maybe people experience has to do with permits to grade or to excavate grub and grade land. That actually is a power that the state has delegated to the counties under soil erosion and conservation. And the county has basically created a grading ordinance based on the soil conservation principles. So there's a whole broad range of anything that the county that you can think of that the county does. All of those things, with the exception of real property tax, are all because the state has passed a law that gives that to the counties. So the county can't just I'm sorry I'm overemphasizing this, but it's very important when it comes to the charter to understand what the limitations are, because people, one of the most common things I hear is, well, where I lived previously, or where I have some, understanding of a different way of how politics works, the county was allowed to do ... which is probably very true. But again, if the Hawaii state legislature hasn't seen it fit to give it to the counties to regulate or to manage here in Hawaii, it doesn't matter what they do anywhere else, because it comes down to that the county can only exercise the powers that are given to it by state law. Okay, so there's a couple of limitations on what the counties can also do. And one of those is that it's a relatively famous case, Richardson versus City and County of Honolulu. And in that case, the question was whether or not the city and county could engage in certain types of leasehold conversions. And maybe for people who are not familiar with recent Hawaii history, after World War II, several of the large landowning entities in Hawaii, to try to relieve some of the longstanding affordable housing lack that existed, opened up portions of their lands to residential home construction. But the land that the houses were built on were leaseholds. They were long-term ground leases as opposed to a fee simple, but long enough that banks would lend to homeowners so they could build their houses. And what happened is after whatever 30 or 40 years, whatever the term of the original lease was, I think it was 30. The original term of a lot of the leases was 30. There was a provision that the rent would be reset at market rates. Well, right after World War II, apparently the rent rates were very low. And so a lot of individuals basically got these really great deals on their land lease for the term of their, basically the first house. Well, when those leases came up for renewal, all of these large landowners, including Kamehameha Schools, said, okay, well, you've got to pay market rate. And if you live in Kahala, that means you're going to have to pay more than $5 a year. And so those people got upset. And so they got the legislature to pass a law that allowed for a process for the conversion of the leaseholds into fee simple. Basically, the state would come in and condemn the lease and then pay whatever the fair market rate is for the lease, for the fee, and then give it to the person who had the house. Okay, well, anyways, why am I telling you this really long story about Hawaii history? Well, in the Richardson case, the city and county of Honolulu decided to do that with condos. So instead of just having a leasehold conversion for single family homes, then the city and county tried to extend that to condos that basically had a ground lease. And the question was do the counties have the power to do that? If a county does a condo leasehold, does that conflict with the state's policy on leasehold conversions in general? And so that was analyzed in that case. And so the issue comes down to, does the power that the county wants to exercise, does it overlap with state law, or is it entirely preempted by state law? So there are, the first category of county powers that the county doesn't have are ones that state law expressly do not give to the counties. Then there's another section, which is a gray area, where there's overlap between what the state has given the county and what the state itself does. And then there's the ones where the county seems to have the power to do something, but apparently is preempted because the state is also doing something in that area. And the way that the legislation has been passed, the courts will imply that, in fact, the counties don't have any say in it. So another case, Kunimoto versus Kawakami, was that the state was going to build a school, Noelani Elementary in Manoa. And in that place, the community did not want the state doing that. And so they created some zoning laws, I think it was community plan. I'm not exactly sure what I can't remember off the top of my head what everything it was the community did to try to prevent it. And the state moved forward with building the school anyways. And the decision of the court was, because education, since I think it was 1961, it was transferred from the counties back to the state, and it's a state function, that the counties cannot thwart the state from doing its state function by passing, that the zoning power does not extend to controlling where the state decides to put schools. So that's basically that's a question of overlap, and the court in that case said that that basically when the state is doing something in its function, the counties can't regulate it. And then the final type of conflict between state and county powers is the preemption one. And I'm sure everybody's familiar with the GMO moratorium case. And in that instance, one of the powers that the counties have is the so-called police power. And the police power is a pretty broad power. And one of those things can be to regulate nuisances, or, to regulate pollution and those sorts of things, or limit it for health, safety, and welfare. And presumably that was what the GMO moratorium, that was the power of the county that the GMO moratorium was based on. And probably it would have been given a presumption of validity, except that the state regulates pesticides. And because the state regulates pesticides, the question was, can the county also regulate pesticides? And I think the county's position, or the referendum proponent's position, was that the county can provide more strict regulation of pesticides than the state did. And so although it's an overlap case, but it's not one where they're in conflict. And I'm sure, as everybody knows, the GMO moratorium was struck down because the ruling was that the state intended to occupy the entire field of pesticide regulation. And so the county had no residual power under its police powers to regulate pesticides. Okay, so that is what is a county. It's probably incomplete. I could have been more comprehensive, but I think you get a general gist of what a county is. And so now the question is, what is a charter? So again, charter can be many things. I think in a colloquial sense, what we say is that the charter is like a mini constitution for the county. I think that's probably the best way to describe it. So the question is, and that is actually what the charter is. So the charter establishes, it organizes the structure and functions of the county, of the legislative, executive, and administrative functions of the county. It sets out the structure, the framework, and allocates the powers of the county among those structures. That's what the charter does. And so the question is, in relation to all of the other laws that exist in this universe, what is the charter? And until 1968, from 1959, well, from 1905, so Hawaii did not have counties before 1905. The way the Kingdom of Hawaii regulated or dealt with municipal powers is that the king appointed a governor for each island, and the governor had, pretty broad powers in a whole number of areas. And that's generally how the kingdom exercised its powers at a municipal level was through basically island governors. And after the missionary party overthrew the kingdom, the individuals who were involved with that, of course, had a specific intent of transforming the government of the Hawaiian Islands into something that would be more supportive or unobstructedly loyal to the sugar plantations and also to check the powers of Hawaiians. And so after the overthrow, government in Hawaii became way more highly centralized for a very short period of time during the Republic period, when there was a sort of apartheid state that was attempted to be created. Sorry, my dog is barking. And then what happened was, when Hawaii was incorporated into the United States, the constitution of this sort of sugar planter apartheid government was adopted with a few modifications as the Organic Act, and that served as the constitution of the territory of Hawaii for all intents and purposes. And there had to be an amendment to that because it was decided that originally the Organic Act didn't allow for county government. And so in 1905, that changed, and then it took several more things to happen, but eventually the counties were actually established. And from 1905 until 1950, well, until the late 60s, that form of county government existed. And so how it worked was, the city and county was sort of an exception, but the other counties, they existed because the territorial legislature created them. And so they existed because of the territorial legislature. And so whenever the territory wanted the county governments to take on some new action, all they would do is pass a law, and then the counties had to do it. And that's how it worked until statehood, 1959. The state constitution that was adopted in 1950 and became our state constitution in 1959 provided that there would be county government and tried to, make things a little more clear that the legislature didn't have total control over what the counties could do. Well, that was not particularly satisfactory, because it turned out that all of those provisions in the Constitution were meaningless because the legislature could still do whatever it wanted to do. And so in 1968, well, I should say in 1964, 1965, they passed a law that allowed each of the counties, the city and county of Honolulu already had a charter, but it allowed the other counties to adopt their own charter. And so the counties did that. And in litigation over Honolulu's charter, the court said in the middle 60s that the legislature can overrule whatever the county's charter is. Whatever the county says, the legislature can pass a law and basically amend the charter. So in 1968, in the 1968 CONCON, there was an amendment to the charter, to the Constitution, that said that a charter is superior to state law as to the allocation of powers and functions of the legislative, executive, and administrative functions of the county. So this is probably a very long roundabout way of explaining this, and I apologize, but that's a very important change in the state constitution, because it said that the provisions of the charter are superior to state law as to the organization, structure, and allocation of powers of the executive, legislative, and administrative branches of county government. So from 1968 going forward, the legislature could no longer just willy-nilly decide, okay, Maui needs to have 7 council members or something like that. That was no longer allowed. And in 1978, there was a case that was brought by the Hawaii Government Employees Association and a number of individuals against the county because the charter was amended to do certain things to the liquor department, to do certain things to the water department, the police department, and also changed how certain people in the civil service were compensated. And what the Hawaii Supreme Court said was that the 1968 amendment specifically said that the charter was supposed to be superior to state law. And so where state law called for the liquor department to be operated in one way, or called for the water supply department to be operated in one way, and the charter provided a conflicting way of doing that, that the charter was superior. They also ruled in that case that civil service is a matter of statewide concern, and that the legislature continues to be allowed to adopt laws of statewide concern, and that if there's a charter provision that conflicts with one of those issues of statewide concern that do not directly affect the structure, function, and allocation of powers between the executive, legislative, administrative branch, those laws will continue to have supremacy. So the county at that time was not free to not follow the uniform government employee payment system and various other civil service requirements that were in state law at the time. Of course, if anybody knows anything about civil service, that's obviously changed because the legislature has actually empowered the counties to have their own civil service systems now. But in 1978, that wasn't the case, and they tried to do it through the charter, and the Hawaii Supreme Court said no. So there's a tension there in terms of what is the precedence of the charter in the grand scope of the law. But I think the short answer, which is worth keeping in mind, is that the charter is supposed to describe and allocate the powers of the county with respect to the legislative, executive, and administrative parts of it. And that when the charter does that, it is superior to state law, that the legislature cannot come in and overrule that generally. That's the general principle. And then one more topic on this about charters is that in 1978, the 1978 Constitutional Convention proposed to voters, and it was adopted, that the counties would have exclusive jurisdiction over real property taxation. And it took 10 or 15 years for that to actually get implemented, because the state had been doing that and giving the county responsibility for certain things and not others. And it was totally convoluted and confusing and not fair, and the counties didn't like it. And so that was changed. So now the legislature has no power over real property taxes. It's solely within the power of the counties, which is why, if you remember from, I think it was 4 years ago, there was a constitutional amendment that was proposed that would have allowed the state to put a surcharge on investment properties to help fund the Department of Education. And I believe it was struck down. I think the holding in that was struck down because the wording that was supposed to go onto the ballot, the counties sued the state to stop it from getting on the ballot. And maybe you don't remember because it wasn't on the ballot. But the counties sued, all 4 counties sued. And they basically said that the wording was misleading, or it didn't correctly inform voters of what the change was going to be. And I believe that that's what was the reasoning why an injunction was issued, and it didn't end up on the ballot. But the counties are they jealously guard their real property tax power. And so that's one of the reasons why, and maybe you've seen more recently, I think they tried to repropose that amendment again, and I don't know if it went anywhere, but that's that the legislature would not be able to put a surcharge on taxing real estate investment properties because that power is solely given to the counties. So I think that's the last. I think I have a list here of all of the stuff related to the charter worth saying. Yeah. So that's basically what a charter is. Now, the Hawaii Supreme Court has actually interpreted our charter a couple of times, in addition to the HGA case I mentioned earlier. And I think the most famous case is known as Maui County Council versus Thompson. And I don't know if anybody remembers this, but 30 years ago, an individual in the wastewater division of Public Works sued the county for wrongful termination, but also sued the mayor at the time, Linda Lingle, and a couple of other people, Corp Council, a couple of individuals, and basically alleged that they had personally been involved with his termination. And the mayor at the time, Linda Lingle, and others Corp Counsel said, well, because I'm one of the people sued, there's a conflict with all of us. And because he's naming us in an individual capacity, we need to be represented by our own attorneys. And the mayor said, okay, hire your own attorneys and the county will pay for it. And so everybody hired their own attorneys, and the finance director paid for this private attorney. And the county council sued, saying that the charter specifically, the power to spend money in the county treasury is a power that's solely within the jurisdiction of the county council, and the mayor cannot approve the expending of funds that have not been allocated by the county council. And the Hawaii Supreme Court agreed with that and basically said that the mayor, that we don't have a true strong mayor system, and that the mayor is not free to spend money from the county treasury if it hasn't been approved by the county council. So that was a charter interpretation. It was a very important issue, and that was settled by the Hawaii Supreme Court. So I think, in a sense, and hopefully I did it in a somewhat systematic way, I've answered the question of what is a charter. So now that you have the idea of what a county is and what a charter is, hopefully, I think maybe that would be a better place to start in terms of what is the function of the Maui County Charter Commission. And so what our function is, or what the function of the commission is every 10 years in our charter, this entity comes into existence and reviews the operations of the county and looks to see if there's any proposed amendments to the charter that basically could make life better for everybody. And that's what our task is to do, is to propose amendments that we believe the voters would support to make the county more efficient. So over the years, there's been a number of issues that have been brought up, charter commission after charter commission, and haven't made it onto the ballot. And there's issues that have come up and do make it onto the ballot. And there's some that come through over a couple of decades and then make it onto the ballot. And then there's others that don't. But that's basically what our task is. So if you have a proposal, I would strongly recommend that you reduce it to writing, that you submit it, and if you would like to, you could come to one of our meetings and to basically emphasize the key points in oral testimony about what your written proposal is. What is the written proposal? So your proposal should have, what are the amendments that you're proposing and why are you proposing them? I think those are the two most important pieces of information that anybody on the Charter Commission would like to have when somebody from the public looks at a proposal or makes a proposal. So if you could do that, that would be really great. You can look at the website, and I think they gave us a special thing. So we have like Maui, www.mauicounty.gov/charter commission. I think you can find our webpage just by doing that. And a couple of people have proposed. Retired UHMC professor Dick Mayer, I think he, I guess, has been keeping track of proposals that people have been making over the last couple of years or something. And he has a very extensive list of proposals. You could take a look at that. Yeah, if you have other proposals, please propose them. Anything that's in the charter can be added to, can be removed, can be changed. And things that are not in the charter, but should be in the charter, are also things that are appropriate for being proposed. So I think with that, I don't know if there's any questions yet or not, or people have any questions. I can answer questions. I can also keep talking. This is a little bit unusual, not like how the KCA meetings have been historically. So I can't really judge if everybody's asleep on the other side, or if people are engaged, because I can't see any of the members. But I don't know if Mike wants to direct, or someone else will direct at this point. Uh-oh, I really did put everybody to sleep. Okay, so nobody has any questions yet.
Lance, you didn't put me to sleep. You certainly gave me an education. I thought I had a reasonable idea, but I see that I didn't. And so I thought that was marvelous to educate people on the history of it. And even as you said, that term county, I'm one of the Howley transplants. And when I came here, and the first time I was angry about something, I'm looking for the mayor of TA to challenge. And the local guys, of course, are laughing at this Howley guy here. Why do you think I'll tell you who the mayor is. They're pointing to somebody's dog or somebody's cow or something. So no, I thought that was excellent. So I do see we do have some questions are popping up from the audience, and I won't read them all because you can read them too. But it looks like the first one says, "What kinds of proposals have people come up with?"
Okay, well, I think I'll answer that only with respect to this commission, because there's a 17-volume proceedings of the last 60 years, if you're interested in all of the historical stuff. I do think that Dick Mayer's, I guess it's like a memorandum to the commission, is the most systematic way. It's on our site. It was a March 11th memo that he sent, several pages long, and I'll just go through because he's basically collected what people in the community have been talking about, and this may give you a sense of what these kinds of proposals are. So the first is that he is on his list is changing so the charter currently requires that the council meet 2 times every month, and the proposal is to change that to them having 22 meetings a year with at least 1 meeting each month. And maybe that sounds like a relatively technical question, and it is, but if you require there to be 2 council meetings every month, as opposed to basically requiring 22 a year and at least 1 meeting each month, you limit the choices of the council to like possibly have like everybody on the council to go on vacation at the same time, for instance. That's at least what he says, or to attend conferences, or to basically be able to have more flexibility in managing their calendar. The second proposal is to, instead of having an annual county budget process, and I don't know how many have really been involved in the county budget process, but basically from March until June, the council does nothing except the budget, more or less. It's a 3-month period where and the council does that every year. And so the proposal is that he's saying is to change that to having a biennial budget, the way that the state legislature has the state budget as a 2-year budget, and have 1 year be the operating budget and the other year be the capital improvement budget, and have these 2-year budgets so that the council doesn't have to spend 1/3 of its year dealing with the budget each year. Just a side question that's popped up is, what is the deadline for proposals? Well, the commission cannot do anything after its statutory deadline or charter imposed deadline. And there's actually a dispute about that at the moment, about when the charter commission is entitled to work. State law that was written in the 60s for the first charter commission only gave us basically 11 months, but the charter gives us 16 months. So that's actually currently in dispute, and that may end up having to get resolved by a lawsuit. But yeah, so there's no deadline really. The deadline for the commission to get stuff on the ballot is either the beginning of next year or in the middle of next year. I would strongly recommend, if you have a proposal, that you get those in as soon as possible, because at some point in the next month, the commission is basically going to look at all the things that have been proposed by everybody else, all of the stuff that we want to propose, and then we're going to create a timeline for all of our meetings over the next 7 months, going through all of these proposals. So if you don't put in the proposal now, there's a possibility that it will not be considered in the way that it would be if you submitted it now. So definitely, if you want to think about proposals, I would start working on that and try to get that to us in the next month at the latest. And then another side question is the commission prohibited from changing any aspects of the charter? Generally, no, because everything has to go to the voters, although there are some limitations. And one of those limitations are, this was a Big Island case they had a referendum there, and their referendum was that the police were to investigate and prosecute marijuana offenses as their lowest priority. So it was really like, it wasn't really like a really strongly enforceable provision, but it was a sort of an aspirational thing that said that the police shouldn't spend any time prosecuting marijuana offenses or, suspicion of marijuana offenses. And the Hawaii courts basically said that that was an impermissible, that was not allowed to be in the charter because it conflicts with a law of statewide concern that basically requires that the county prosecutors and the county police to engage in law enforcement without restriction. So I think when so things that can't be changed is if it conflicts with state law or it conflicts with some kind of state or constitutional provision. So obviously passing a charter amendment that permitted invidious discrimination based on race or national origin would be illegal, and that would not be permitted. That's a example. Okay, going back to Dick's list, another proposal is to move the inauguration date of the council and the mayor so that it's not in January, but it's in December, which is like how it's done in the Big Island and in Honolulu. So there isn't this long period of lame duck. Another proposal is to have regional voting. So this is an issue that comes up every charter commission and nothing's ever made it onto the ballot. One is to change our current council members are 9 county-wide districts. So I know people think like, oh, we have, for example, in Kihei, Kelly King is the Kihei council member. That is not true. Kelly King represents the entire county. The only thing that connects her to Kihei is the fact that she lives in Kihei, and the charter requires that one of the 9 council members has to live in South Maui. But her district encompasses the entire county. So one of the proposals over the years has been to change that to have 9 single member districts where each district is basically of an equal proportion in terms of voters, which is required by the US Constitution, the one person, one vote principle. That has never gotten onto a ballot, although it's been proposed basically since the 60s. Another proposal that has emerged over the years is to have 3 multi-member districts and then either have residency or not have a residency requirement in those districts. So basically carving the county up into 3 districts of equal size relatively, and to have 3 people run in each of those districts. And of course, we have 3 senators, state senators that have carved up, the Senate districts have carved up our county into 3 relatively proportional districts. So it is possible to do that. And there are, benefits and pros and cons to every system. And but those 2 have been proposed. Another proposal is to allow council majority to vote to be represented by attorneys that are staffed in the Office of Council Services and not just advised. That has to do with the role of corporation counsel advising both the mayor and the council. Allowing the establishment of a authority to manage economic activities and utilities, like I guess having like an electrical co-op, I'm not exactly sure, or a housing co-op, or yeah, I don't know. That's a pretty broad proposal. Modifying the code of ethics. There's been some concerns about the county code of ethics, and so that's a proposal. I guess getting more clarity on who has authority to sign documents for the county when the mayor is unable or refuses to act. Some issues related to agendas and open government and open records. Making the police commission a truly independent citizen oversight board. And just a little bit of information about this, maybe people are not familiar. So there are police commissions in the US that operate as citizen oversight boards. They're basically an independent board or commission that ensures that the police are doing what they're supposed to be doing, and to investigate and to make, either recommendations, or they can order things to be done. Our police commission is not a citizen oversight board. Our police commission basically operates as part of the management of the police department. So this proposal is to basically have an independent citizen oversight board. Another is to restructure the liquor control department by deleting the adjudication board. For example, another would be to have the liquor inspectors be members of the police department, and basically have a uniform law enforcement, as opposed to having the liquor department having its own special police force. How members of boards and commissions are selected, changing the terms of boards and commissions. Instead of having an administrative law judge, a hearings officer to manage contested cases, as opposed to having 9 ordinary citizens do that. That, I guess, is to limit the legal liability of the county. Making corporation counsel more independent, severing the tie between the tenure of department heads and the mayor, more strongly empowering the managing director, changing how department heads can be removed, separating housing and human concerns into 2 departments, having a planning commission for each community plan area, except Kaho'olawe. So right now, the island of Molokai and the island of Lanai both have their own planning commissions, and they also are community plan areas. And the idea, I think, would be to give each community plan area their own planning commission, so that instead of it being an island-wide island-wide planning commission, instead so for example, the South Maui area would have its own planning commission, ostensibly filled with South Maui people who would be making decisions along those lines. I think an alternative to that, or change also, or a similar proposal, is to have neighborhood boards, which is something that Honolulu has. And that's, I think, somewhat related to it and somewhat different, but that's another possibility. How commissions make decisions, whether it's by majority or whether it's supermajority, that's something that the commission does look at and can look at. The Land Use Commission is not allowed to reclassify land into a different state land use district unless a supermajority, 6 out of the 9 commissioners agree to do that. So there is precedent for that. I believe that our planning commissions operate by a simple majority at the moment. I don't know if that answers the question. Changing the thresholds for referenda, initiatives, and recall, creating an ombudsman position, requiring remote audio and video conferencing for all council and council committee meetings. So those are all of the ones that are listed on Dick Mayer's list. And those are quite a few. I think maybe 1 or 2 more have been proposed. I think one proposal that came in was to have the fast track 201H process to limit the kinds of proposals that the county council can hear to those that are 75% affordable or higher. That's a proposal that's come in, and I think that's, for the most part, those are all of the proposals that have come in. So, okay, that's a good question. Would the Charter Commission recommend the county manager form of government that was on the ballot last time? So, there have been multiple proposals that have been repeatedly submitted to the voters and have been voted down. So there's nothing legally that stops the Charter Commission from proposing a county manager form of government again. And if you feel strongly about that, I would definitely get your proposal into us as soon as possible, because if the commission is to take that up, that's definitely something that needs to be on our list of to-dos. at the very beginning, because if someone drops that in on us in November, December, I think it's too large of an issue to have to deal with in one meeting. So, but yeah, there's nothing that legally stops the commission from considering previous proposals. I mean, the council, and I think even the commission, one of the commissions previously, I can't remember which one it is, so maybe it wasn't a commission, but changing council terms to 4 years. Well, the original charter actually was proposed in 1966, specifically proposed to have council members serve for 4-year terms. And that was actually the primary reason why our first charter was voted down. So when the 66 charter was proposed to the voters of Maui, it was voted down. And they had to establish another charter commission that proposed a second charter in 1968, which was adopted by the voters with 2-year terms. But that issue of 4-year council terms has come up 3 or 4 times, maybe 5 over the years. So yeah, you can always keep asking voters. You know, so in my background as a political scientist, I think unless there's some change to what was proposed last time, I don't think that the result is going to be much different. So definitely, if that's something, whoever asked that question, if you are really interested in the county manager form of government, I would seriously get your proposal in as soon as possible, and to possibly reflect on what you think may have been some of the reasons in the proposals that people didn't support it, and make modifications, because it just is a common sense idea. It's probably has a better chance if it were to get onto a ballot if it tried to address some of those concerns. But definitely, yeah, there's nothing that stops us from considering or making proposals that have been previously considered. I mean, the Board of Water Supply has gone from under the mayor to semi-autonomous to autonomous to semi-autonomous, and now it's back under the mayor. So there's nothing set in stone. As long as it doesn't violate state law or the Constitution, we can propose things. Any other questions? Well, they say in radio that there's never supposed to be more than 3 seconds of dead air. Oh, okay. So yeah, yeah, I can definitely do that. So there's a question about how the testimony process works at our meetings. So for these first couple of meetings, the primary purpose of the meeting is to hear testimony from members of the public. I think, as Mike can confirm, 10 years ago when this was done in person, 3 people showed up to testify, and actually only 2 people showed up to testify. The other person just happened to be walking by and was curious about what was going on. And that was, for the last one, that was more or less how it went. There was very little public testimony. I think some of it is because people don't really understand what the charter is or what the Charter Commission is for. That's part of it. I think there's a whole bunch of people who don't really care. And yeah, and you know, and then maybe it's not a convenient time, I'm not really sure. So the way that we did it was, although it's by Blue Jeans, we still wanted to save the sort of customary thing of going out into the different areas of the county to hear from the public. We do intend, at least this was from the discussion in the commission meeting, we do intend to do this again later in the process when we actually have proposals to hear what individuals have to say. But right now, we've set it up so each area of Maui County gets their time to testify. And so on Thursday, the 20th, that's for Upcountry and South Maui and Kaho'olawe, to the residents of those areas to voice their proposals and so forth. And then the first week in June is going to be Lanai and West Maui. And so any member of the public can testify. That's your right under Chapter 92 to give oral testimony. Of course, you can give written testimony anytime. It doesn't have to be at a meeting. But the way that we're structuring these evening meetings is that the areas, the area that I just said, you know, the 2 areas, that residents of those areas will be permitted to testify first, and then anybody who's not part of that area will be allowed to testify when all of those individuals testify. So my strong recommendation is, if you can, is to come up with a written testimony that lays out what your proposal is and why you're proposing it, and then use your 3 minutes, which is what members of the public, if they give oral testimony, how much time they're given. Use your 3 minutes to give us the highlights, or just basically hit the main points that you think are important about your written proposal, because it's much easier to remember everything if it's in writing. And also, because we're amending a legal writing, it's also very useful to have that in writing. So the meeting starts at 6, and we will take public oral testimony until everybody who is present that wants to testify has been given the opportunity to testify. So, and if you can't make it on the 20th, you can of course still come to the one that's the first Thursday in June. I don't have the date in front of me at the moment. Is that the 1st? The 3rd. So you can come to the June 3rd one, but you just have to wait for everybody from West Maui and Lanai to testify first, but you can also come to that one. So yeah, what is your proposal and why are you proposing it? Those are the 2 questions to answer, preferably doing it in writing, and then using your oral testimony to highlight your proposal and also to be available for questions. So, and then one other thing too about proposals is it's somewhat of a fine line, understanding what the distinction is between this, but the Charter Commission's role is to deal with the framework, the structure, and the organization of the county. Many proposals that come in over the years, what people are really proposing are ordinances. And so those are things that the county council can presently do that do not require an amendment to the charter for them to be done. There's a little bit of overlap because sometimes people want to propose things to limit what can presently be done, and sometimes in very specific ways. And so the general rule of thumb is, if your proposal is super specific, there's a possibility, if you're not sure if it's related to the structure, organization, et cetera, of the county, the more specific your proposal is, the more likely it is that it shouldn't be a charter amendment. So that's one thing to consider also. If it's, someone proposed, and I'm sorry, I won't name the person, don't want to embarrass them. They proposed at a previous meeting that all of the voting records of all the council members should be put on, I guess, their website in an easily accessible way. And so that is, that's something that the council can do right now. It's not something that requires, a charter amendment to do. It's just something that the council could pass as an ordinance. And I think the only way that something like that would be appropriate for a charter amendment is if the council refused to do something that it could do, and it's of such importance to the structure and organization of the county that it should be elevated to a charter amendment. So that's an example of it's a great idea. I actually did that in the 90s when I was working for Tom Morrow and Kalani English. And I also did it I think it was from 2002 to 2008. I had that, and it's much easier to do if you have it all in one place. Of course, one surprise is that most of the things the council votes on are ceremonial resolutions and amendments to the budget, and they're all 9-0. So just posting that online, actually, it wouldn't be helpful without additional interpretation, or selecting what should be highlighted, because otherwise you just get a whole bunch of votes that are all 9-0 or 8-0, and it doesn't really tell you much. So the cutoff for written submissions before Thursday meetings, preferably by Wednesday afternoon if you want us to read it before the meeting. But again, if you can't get it done until lunchtime on Thursday, please still do it and send it in. If you put your contact information, I do believe that there are a number of commissioners who are contacting people who submit proposals to ask additional questions, because obviously if a commissioner likes your proposal, they might end up being the proponent of it. And so they would want to contact you to get more information about your idea and to try to see whatever they're thinking, if it matches with what you're thinking and that sort of thing, to make sure that the final written proposal, is satisfactory. So definitely the sooner that you can get your written submission in, the better. And also, if you don't have to provide contact information, but if you do, that can be very helpful because commissioners can then contact you if they're interested or they have further questions and aren't able to ask it during a meeting. So yeah, so that's, I think that hopefully answers that question. Yeah, do it in writing. What is the proposal? Why are you proposing it? Okay, so another question is, so the other way that the charter can be amended is by the council. So if you recall at the last election, there were either 10 or 11 proposals that all of them, except for the county charter, county mayor structure, they all passed. And so the council does do that. They do. In fact, actually, one of the proposals at the last election, which maybe you don't remember voting on, but it did pass, was that to change. So until this commission, all previous commissions were appointed, all 11 commissioners were appointed by the mayor. And yeah, and now they're not. And so now the council picks 9. And so that was something that was proposed by the council. It was approved by the voters. And because that was the case, at the beginning of this year, the council was the one that picked 9 of the 11 members of the commission. I was one of those. I was nominated by Mike Molina. I live in Makawao, and he's the council member from Makawao. So he nominated me, and I was picked. So that's a difference, and that's basically the other way that the charter is changed. And the charter is relatively regularly changed by the council, or proposals are submitted to voters to make those changes. The nice thing about the Charter Commission is that, first of all, it requires that one exist every 10 years. And also, I'm not beholden to voters or the, peculiarities of elected office, and neither are any of the other commissioners. And so our only job is to look at the charter and propose changes, and we don't have to worry about getting reelected or trying to hold on to our power as council members or not. I don't think our current council necessarily feels that way, but there have been councils in the past that have felt that way. And so the opportunity of a charter commission is that interesting, significant changes can be thought out in a way that the way the council works, it's just not possible, because they're dealing with budget, or they're dealing with all the other million things going on in the county, the actual operations of the county. And we have to look at the operations of the county, but we don't deal with it in the way that the council does. Our job really is to try to figure out what is the best and most efficient way of having a county, and how to allocate those powers. And knowing that if the voters agree with what we propose, and then it turns out it doesn't work out, that the council can either propose a change, or 10 years from now it can be fixed again. So nothing is fixed in stone. And even when the Charter Commission is finished, there's still the opportunity to make changes. So.
Lance, I'll jump in here. We don't have a set ending time. We generally try and wrap up by 8 o'clock, but so we'll just see if any other questions come in, or if you have any closing comments. But I thought this was terrific for us. It was educational, and I was hoping we got more of a variety of questions, but again, I think it goes back to people don't really understand, and now that you've given them so much, maybe they need a day or two to start digesting it, or maybe they'll go look. We always tell them we have the current charter on our website, And we always say to them, go look on the website and look at the charter. It's not impossible, it's not 2,000 pages of stuff. It's all well organized. So it's a relatively simple document, but it's like old thing with the horse in the water. Well, here's the charter, but if they don't go and look at it, that doesn't help much.
Yeah, and I would just say if this is something that really interests you and you want to have a really comprehensive, or you want to have as broad of a way of thinking about it, one other thing is to go and look at how the other counties structure their counties. We have the county of the Big Island, the county of Hawaii, and Honolulu both have single member district voting. They have 9 council members that are each picked by districts that are relatively equal population. And then we have the county of Kauai that basically has the old school way of how the Board of Supervisors used to be picked. And there's just basically a list of 14. I mean, there's an unlimited list in the primary, and then they narrow it down to the top 14. And then from that top 14, the top 7 in the final thing are the ones that become the council members. So that's how it's just basically, it's much closer to Maui's, except they don't have residency areas. They just have a straight list of 7. So that's one instance where there's differences, and that's one way to think about it. Another is that all of the other counties have elected prosecutors. We're the only county that has a appointed prosecuting attorney. So I don't, whether that's good or bad, I don't know, but that's another example of a difference. But there's a whole number of those sorts of differences. And so if you really are very interested and you want to get a better sense of, well, how could things possibly be, the first step to do would be to look at the other counties' charters and see how they do it. I mean, Kauai, for example, their charter authorizes the county to establish a electrical co-op. So they don't have a electrical, they don't have a private electrical company. They have the Kauai co-op, where basically all of the people who get electrical service are member shareholders of the co-op. So I mean, there's quite an expansive range of possibilities in the realm of what isn't in our charter. That's something that the county could do. That's something that it's hard to, it's somewhat indefinite or indeterminate. So it's much harder to talk about because it's not structured by anything that currently exists. So we can refer to it like, well, Kauai has a electrical co-op, or this county has that, but the sky is not the limit, but there is an indeterminate thing with respect to things that we just aren't doing at all, and it's not within the charter, so it wouldn't be simply changing. So those kinds of proposals, definitely, if you have those, please think of this, please give really good reasons or good support for why it should be there, because you have to assume that members of the commission are not familiar with things that are not currently in the scope of our county government.
Yeah, and I think that's so relevant when you mention, which is the situation where each council member represents everyone, but I think anybody who observes sees some council members speak as that's all they're representing. My district is this, and these are my people. And if somebody pinpoints the question, they'll say, I represent everybody, but gee, it sure doesn't sound like they do. So maybe that kind of a change would say, well, if that's what you're really doing, maybe that should be a change. Maybe we should have you really representing only your district, not countywide.
Yeah, well, I think there's a little bit of a rhetorical flourish sometimes with that. It kind of reminds me of Joshua, where he basically says, but as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. And I mean, it kind of has that sort of quality to it, but I just think that that's like this is not I'm not in any way denigrating politicians, but that is so one of those political rhetoric things that it's, well, me and my district and that sort of thing. But the truth is that in Maui County, we don't have districts. We have one district, which is the county district, and all council members are elected by the county as a whole.
Good, and we should mention that Rob put that up there, that the meeting is recorded and it is available. And we have found, since we started doing these meetings as opposed to the live meeting, when it was over, once in a while Akaku would come and tape our meeting live. but most times no. And most times the next day when people would say, well, when is the meeting? Well, too late, you missed it. Well, now with technology and with the effect of the pandemic, we do record the meeting. So some people just choose to do that. Maybe they have a favorite TV program that's on this evening and they're watching that. Oh, I can catch the KCA meeting on tape tomorrow. So I don't see any more questions coming up, Lance. So again, I will just say we truly appreciate it with all you have going. Hopefully many of us will be there Thursday evening, be there. I think we're all still thinking we're going someplace instead of sitting on our collie at home watching it, but that we will be participating, especially when we have first crack at giving suggestions and testimony for.
Well, that's how it is. In the 1960s, I think everybody thought that we were going to have space shuttles or spacecraft that were going to take us to the Andromeda galaxy and so forth and so on. And it turns out as time goes on, the technological future is you don't leave your house.
Yes, that's right. The Jetsons didn't have it right at all, did they?
Yeah, you'll end up in the clouds, but only in your Zoom.
That's right.
Well, I guess if there's no further questions, but really, if people have additional questions, I hesitate to say, please, without any restriction, email me, because I've done that before, and then I end up getting overwhelmed with questions. But definitely, if you can come to this Thursday's meeting, do that. If you can't, please come in 2 weeks. After the next meeting, our meetings will actually change to be on Thursday mornings. So we'll move from Thursday evenings to Thursday before lunch. It's still first and third Thursdays of the month, but it'll be instead of starting at 6 o'clock, I believe it starts at 9. And we'll accept public testimony. So, I mean, this is not to encourage you to procrastinate or delay, but do know that, if you can't get to it until a month from now, you're not foreclosed from making a proposal, but just do know that a month from now or so, we're basically going to be laying out how the next 7 months are, how we're going to divide our time over the next 7 months. So if you can get your proposal in, the sooner the better. That way we can have a more orderly way of dividing up our time. And of course, if there's something that's important that shows up late, we'll still consider it, but it's just helpful for us in terms of planning out how we're going to be dividing our time if you could do that earlier than later.
Of course, Lance, and one thing we should emphasize again for people who are not so Akamai is that you guys were all volunteers, unlike elected officials who are getting paid to do the job.
Well, actually, I have to qualify that. So in addition to how long we have to do our work, there's also a dispute about whether or not we get paid, because state law says we're supposed to get paid $1,000. That's 1965 $5. But our charter says that board and commission members are not supposed to be compensated. So this small dispute over which applies also applies to, there's a couple of other ways it applies that there's a conflict as well. But yeah, so I don't want people to, I don't believe that we're supposed to be compensated. I believe our charter makes it clear that we're supposed to be volunteers. And I think everybody's acting in that capacity. We're not expecting like, oh, we're doing this and getting paid for it. But yes, I just wanted to clarify that there's a dispute over whether or not we're fully volunteers or whether we might get a $1,000 check at the end of it. But and that's still in dispute at the moment. So.
Well, thank you for that. Was another thing that I was not aware of. I was aware of the vagueness of how long it's going to go on. I heard that at your, I'm like, gee, that's pretty tough. You don't know, you're signing up. Well, how long am I signing up for? Well, we don't know. You might have to stick along. But we certainly appreciate you being here for us this evening, and especially appreciate that you do, and the rest of the commissioners did step up to take on this chore for the benefit of our community.
My pleasure, our pleasure.
Okay, so we'll say mahalo and aloha, and hopefully we'll see you on the tube on Thursday evening as well.
Yes, thank you so much for inviting me.
Aloha.
Aloha.